for breath. The question then could be, what is your chamber and several other chambers across the country, what are you existing for?
Well, you see, this economy...
Dead industries, agriculture is comatose.
Yes. You know, by nature, we are very resilient people. You know, the situation may be challenging, but they say that tough times don't last. Tough people do. And I think that is what is playing out. And what is also happening now is also challenging the creativity and innovativeness of those who are in business. Because winners don't quit. There will always be challenges.
I'm actually asking about your chamber, yes. I mean, the premier chamber in the country, and other chambers. What are you doing in a situation where the industries are dead and agriculture is gasping for breath? What do you exist for?
You see,
that's the question now.
You see, what we do as a Chamber of Commerce, primarily advocacy. Because we know that there is no way you can do a sustainable business without having the right kind of environment. And government has a major role to play in creating the environment. The opportunities are there. This is an economy that remains the largest economy on the continent. This is an economy that has the largest market on the continent. This is an economy with over 170 million people. That's a huge market that many investors outside of the country are even struggling to come and take advantage. So the opportunities are there. What we have been doing is to prevail on government to create the right kind of environment. Take, for instance, the issue of energy.
How do you go about prevailing on government to do these things?
Well, we have a number of channels that we use. We dialogue with them. We engage with government. In the last 6 months, we have had at least 2 major meetings with the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and his economic team, looking at what the challenges are, submitting memoranda to them, and they also sharing their perspectives on what they are doing and what challenges that they have. Just 3 weeks ago, we also had a meeting with the Vice President and the economic team looking at the economic recovery and growth plan.
Now, you mentioned the fact that they also come up with the challenges that they're facing.
Yes.
Can you reel out 1 or 2 of those challenges?
Well, for instance, in power, at that meeting, the Minister of Power highlighted the frustration he has been going through as a result of the vandalization of gas pipelines. He has been working around to mobilize investment. He has been working around to ensure that we generate more power. He has been working hard to ensure that the transmission capacity is improved so that there can be proper evacuation of power from those generating to those who will distribute. But that the vandalization of gas pipeline has been a major issue for him. It's a major frustration, and that is partly part of the reasons that the acting president, who is also the vice president now, have been going around at least making consultations in the Niger Delta to ensure that we have some stability in that area. You know, activities or militant activities in the Niger Delta is not only affecting power, it's also affecting our oil output. And because we are still largely dependent on the oil sector, both for foreign exchange and for revenue, to the extent that we continue to have these recurring issues in the Niger Delta, it affects revenue, it affects foreign exchange, that is foreign exchange earnings. It affects our foreign reserves. And once those things are affected, the fundamentals of the macroeconomy is also affected. It affects the capacity of government to stabilize the foreign exchange market. It affects the capacity of government to meet its financial obligations.
That leads me to the next question I have for you. Does your chamber your chamber's activities, do they cover the international oil market? What's your idea of how Nigeria's oil trade can receive a boost?
Well, again, there is a local dimension, there's an international dimension. The oil sector receiving a boost is a function first of the output, it's a function of price. The price we don't have much control over because it's determined by variables outside our own domestic control. It's determined by, we have the cartel, the oil cartel, which we call OPEC. Luckily, at least our own person is the secretary, as secretary of OPEC.
Secretary General.
Yes, Secretary General of OPEC, and they have been doing quite a great deal to show up the price of oil price. And we are beginning even to see some results. They are collaborating with even non-OPEC countries like Russia to ensure that there's a moderation in output so that prices can go up. And we are getting some good return from it. That is already beginning to have a positive impact on the fortunes of those who are in oil investment upstream. That is one angle.
Is there a way you relate to them to be able to get results? I mean, your chamber.
Of course, we have members. We have all the major oil producing companies are members. And we also relate, of course, with international organizations. We relate with the embassies domestically. And the oil producing companies also have a way of also linking up with those who are our representatives in OPEC to let them know what the issues are, what the challenges are, and to see what the OPEC can do. And just as I said, because the Secretary General of OPEC is also in Nigeria, so there is a better communication flow between the domestic players in the sector and OPEC generally. Then the second leg of the issue is the output. And that is about the kind of disruption that is happening, the kind of security challenges that is taking place in the Niger Delta region, which is also affecting output, it's affecting investment. Even some banks that had exposure to oil and gas investment, some of them are facing a lot of pressure in the last 2 years. First, because of the declining output. Secondly, because of the declining price. You know, some of the investments, some of the loans that have been given to support some of these sectors is already having some backlash, some adverse effects on the banking sector. This is why even the non-performing loans now have been going beyond the normal threshold, because the threshold for non-performing loans as a percentage of total loans, the comfortable threshold is normally about 5%. But now we are talking of a threshold of close to 12 to 13%, because of the challenges that those who are both in the oil sector, in the power sector, and even the challenges that those who are in the real economy are facing. Because there's a lot of exposure of the banks to many of these businesses.
Okay, let's move into the area of food. The prices of food have hit the rocks. I mean, have hit the roof in Nigeria. And recently, the Minister of the Minister of Agriculture, he laid the blame squarely on the doorsteps of customs, police, and army officers who, according to him, are always on the highways to waylay the people who are transporting goods from the rural areas into the urban centers to collect toll fee, as they call it. So he is laying the blame on the doorsteps of these officers for the escalating prices of food. Do you agree with the minister?
No, I don't agree with him. You see, the issues are much more...
You say he must be kidding.
Well, I won't say that, but I don't agree with him. Because, you know, the issues are much more fundamental. It's a function of productivity of the sector. It's a function of the value chain that you have in the sector. If you talk to an average farmer, the challenges are enormous. Challenges with regard to finance. I've seen somebody who is in farming or who is in the agricultural sector, went to the bank, even with collateral. They were asking him to pay 30%
Why should
interest.
that be, for goodness sake?
That is something that's a different matter.
Your chamber can do nothing about that?
Well, the best we can do is to advocate, because there is a whole lot of macroeconomic management shortcomings that contribute to that.
Is there a way such banks can be sued?
Of course, we cannot sue them because they are not forcing you to take the loan. And in any case, the way the monetary policy and some of these fiscal policies are managed has also created a condition for this kind of things to happen. It's a different subject on its own. Let me stay with that. We can come back to the issue of interest rates. Now, they talk about the cost of fund. I told you now about the experience of 30%, even with collateral. Then there's the issue of even land. Sometimes people take it for granted that you can just walk into any place, acquire land, and begin to farm. It's not exactly like that. Land acquisition is a major issue for those who, because you cannot feed this country properly unless you have a mechanized agriculture. The space is still dominated by peasant farmers.
Why is this so, for goodness? In the year of our Lord 2017.
That is also part of the challenge. We need to ensure that we create the environment for those who have the financial muscle to go into agriculture. The returns in agriculture, as we speak, is still not good enough. It is better for somebody who has capital now to go and buy treasury bills at 20% interest, go to bed, than for you to go and invest in either manufacturing or in agriculture. Sometimes people who have invested in these sectors come to me and they give the impression that the situation had made them look stupid in terms of investment. Because you have an economy that is rewarding activity that is not adding value. I mean, if you invest in treasury bill is zero risk.
Exactly.
And you get 18%, you get 20%. Why must you go and invest in agriculture?
All right.
Where you be battling with the issue of fertilizer, battling with the issue of tractors and equipment, battling with the issue of processing, battling with the issue of transportation, battling with the issue of storage. I mean, it doesn't make sense. So an economy gets the kind of investment that it deserves.
It deserves.
So we need to create the right kind of policy environment that will attract capital to agriculture, that will attract capital to manufacturing. Because the returns from those sectors now, the returns are so low that even those who are there, many of them are regretting that they're there.
What will it take you to pressure government to put these right policies in place? Because I believe that's why you chambers of commerce and industry exist.
We have been pressuring government. You know, it is one thing for
when would they yield to you?
Well, that is a governance and leadership issue. Because again, it depends on their understanding of what is on ground. It depends on the quality of feedback that the government itself is getting.
And I mean, look at the very man at the top too.
Yes, yes. I mean, it depends on the feedback. The man at the top has a very good intention. He means well. There is no doubt about it. But the quality of feedback that you get will determine the kind of action he takes.
Okay, let's move on because so many of these issues.
Yes.
Here. Still talking about the local raw material producers. What's your chamber's role in connecting them to the world market? Now, some critics have accused your chambers of being too busy in the air-conditioned rooms. I mean, to be able to attend to these local farmers.
No, that's not correct.
Okay.
You see, first of all, we promote what we call backward integration. You don't even encourage the idea of exporting raw materials. Okay. It's not good for our economy. It is better if you have a chain within the economy where the raw materials can be processed. It creates more jobs, it creates more revenue, and it also enlarges the scope of what you call the multiplier effect or such activities on the economy. That is what we stand for, and that is what we often promote. Some progress has been made in the food and beverage industry, in the area of backward integration. Okay. If you look at the breweries industry now, there's a lot of local grains that they use, which is also helping those who are in the maize, the farmers, or those who are in that sector, to feed into the breweries industry. It's also helping those who are in the industry to reduce their exposure to the pressure of foreign exchange.
Okay, quickly on that issue of local raw materials.
Yes.
If at the moment the government is not putting anything in place to be able to keep those local materials here in Nigeria, process them, and then get them into manufactured goods which can be exported. In the interim, what do we do with the raw materials? To let them run to waste?
Well, that is the challenge. That is why there's a lot of exportation of raw materials, exportation of cocoa, ice and skin, cashew nuts, shea butter, you know, all sorts of things.
All sorts of raw materials
are going out in raw form.
Even timber.
Even timber. And even the most of all is our crude oil. We have about 5 or 6 refineries. We are still exporting crude and importing refined petroleum products. The biggest pressure we have today on our foreign exchange market and on our reserves is on the importation of refined petroleum products. We are perhaps the only oil-producing country that imports refined petroleum products. It's a major anomaly, and it's a sad commentary over the leadership that we have had over the years. Because if you get it right with oil and gas, although we talk about diversification, but there's a lot of diversification that can take place even within the oil and gas space. You have the fertilizer plants that you can develop. You have the petrochemical plants that you can develop from it. You have a lot of gas that you can use to develop some other industries that you can even be exporting. Although we export quite some gas, but you can do a lot more. It's a sector that can leverage, on which the economy can leverage to do quite a lot of things. But unfortunately, because of the policies and things, we still spend a lot of money importing things that we normally should produce. If you talk about backward integration, it is easier in sectors in which you have what you call competitive advantage, and oil and gas is one of them, where you can easily get your raw material, you process. And I mean, you make more money, you make more impact on the economy. For instance, we are exporting refined products. But here we are, it is exactly the other way around.
Opposite. All right, let's look at the issue of international trade fairs. I see it's one of those things you do within the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Now, with the current recession biting so hard, what is the prospect of organizing international trade fairs when purchasing power is low anyway?
You see,
and where do we even get the money to sponsor international trade fairs?
Well, you know, we held
you as a non-government organization.
Yes, yeah, we are non-governmental.
And non-profit.
And non-profit.
So where do we get the money?
Also non-loss anyway. Yes. Now, first of all, I must say that we have a crop of entrepreneurs in this country that are very determined and that are, you know, very resilient. And I must drop my heart for Nigerian enterprises and Nigerian entrepreneurs. No matter how tough the situation is, they still find a way
to wriggle out.
To wriggle out and to continue to do things. Now, the Lagos International Trade Fair is a platform for businesses to showcase what they have to offer. Not just to the Nigerian public, but to even people in the West African sub-region and to even the international community. And we have an economy now that, because of the challenges we are having with foreign exchange, enterprises that are not too much import dependent are becoming more competitive. They are becoming more rewarding. So such enterprises are having an edge. And enterprises that are able to also replace imports, If there are things that you are importing, you know, either food items, or clothing, toothpick, all toothpaste, all those things. Because of the nature of what is happening to the to the exchange rate, those things are becoming more and more expensive. And it's challenging the creativity and innovativeness of our own entrepreneurs to begin to look at substitutes for imports, replacements for imports. And some things are beginning to emerge. There's a lot of investment in recycling, for instance. Since ordinarily that people will have just thrown away, there are a lot of recycling that is taking place. And people are making money from such things. A lot of industries are looking at the possibility of how to substitute their raw materials that they normally import and looking at local sourcing. So that is why even in the agricultural sector space, in spite of all the challenges, a lot of activities are going on there. Because industries are now looking inwards to see what they can get locally. So all those industries that have that opportunity, they still come to the trade fair. Foreign investors that are still seeking opportunities in Nigeria, that are seeking partners in Nigeria, they still come to the trade fair. Because no matter what we say, the fundamentals of this economy is still very strong. That is why a lot of investors, foreign investors, are still looking up to us.
The question of how do you find the funding for the international trade fairs?
Well, the international trade fairs, the funding is basically because you have to pay to participate. And to the extent that people still participate.
So it's by subscription?
Yes, yes. You pay to participate. We don't get any subvention from government. Okay. And to make matters worse, you know, we use venues that are also not purpose-built.
Okay.
So each time we state the trade fair, we have to build all those temporary structures from scratch, which is also not cheap. You have to put in your generator, put in mobile toilets, mobilize the security agencies, all those things. But we are still managing.
Is it becoming tough to arrange such?
It is very tough. It is very tough.
It's becoming. I'm saying because of the recession.
Yes, because of the recession, the patronage is also dropping. The cost is going up.
You still like to continue?
Of course, we have to continue. We are in business.
All right. At this point, we will take a break, and we'll be back with many more of these issues to raise with Mr. Yusuf. Stay with us. Yes, welcome back. The program is still Galaxy Line, and my guest in the studio is the Director General of the Lagos State Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Muda Yusuf. Now, let's continue, and we look at the infrastructural deficit that we are battling with in the country. We take the seaports, for instance. Seaports play a significant role in a nation's trading capacity and capability. You agree with me?
Yeah, that's correct.
Now, a research report has revealed that Nigeria loses over 1 trillion naira every year to port inefficiencies and processes. How does your chamber respond to this?
Well, it's a major issue for us in the chamber and for the business community as a whole, because it is most times a very frustrating experience for those who import. First, there is the issue of the very voluminous documentation through the customs, the shipping agencies, the terminal operators, the regulatory agencies like NAFDAC, SON, and all of that. And sometimes by the time you even get through all of that and you get out of the gate of the ports, you still encounter some security agencies demanding for all manner of documents, you know, coming up with strategies to extort money. You know, it can be very frustrating, really. And that is why...
Are you so helpless about it?
Well, you know, when you are dealing with government agencies, you can only do so much. Unless you are able to get a very strong buy-in from the top. You know, things may not change that fast. These are issues that have been recurring. I mean, we have been talking about a target of 48 hours to clear cargo for several years. Right from the days of Obasanjo, we have
just
been talking
under 48
about
hours.
Yes. But it has not happened. You bring in a cargo and sometimes a customs officer tells you, okay, this is the value of it, but no, this thing should be more than this. Even when you have your invoice and all of that. And you begin to argue, to discuss, sometimes to negotiate. Because if you don't do quick and clear the cargo, you run into demurrage. Demurrage by the shipping agencies, demurrage by the terminal operators. And what demurrage means is the extra charges that you pay.
Exactly. Which now come on top of the goods that you are bringing.
And meanwhile, the goods you imported, you probably took a loan from the bank at an outrageous interest rate. So the earlier you quickly sort yourself out.
This is where the increased prices of things to buy get that high.
These are part of the factors. So you go through so much pain. And that is why sometimes people prefer to go to the neighboring ports, to Benin Republic and things like that. That is not to excuse the fact that you have a few private sector people or a few importers that are also not honest. Because we must admit that. Some people bring in things they should not bring in. Some do all sorts of things like under invoicing, under declaration, in order to evade duty. Those problems are there. But generally, as a system, the system is very frustrating. And recently, as part of our advocacy activities, we visited the Minister of Transportation, Right Honorable Rotimi Amechi. And we also put some of these issues before him. The challenges that businesses are going through.
What clue does he have?
Well, the clue that he had and what he told us, although he also expressed some frustration as to some of the issues even within the public sector space. He told us that, well, at this point, the solution he feels that we can get is what we call a single window for customs clearance.
Just on spot.
Yes, and what that means is that this thing will have to be driven by IT. Once your cargo is coming, you key in all the information on that platform electronically. The customs does what it needs to do electronically. NAFDAC, if you want to do anything, you do it electronically, so that you minimize the interface, physical interface between the importer and all these agencies.
That leads to all kinds of
fraud and corruption. Yes. So, and we agree with him. It's part of the thing that we've also been pushing for. But because of some vested interests in the status quo, these processes have not come, you know. So he also said, well, it's something that he's also trying to push. Unfortunately, some of the agencies are also not within his own ministry. The customs, for instance, is under the Ministry of Finance. I need to get the buy-in of the customs for these things to work. So again, it takes a very strong political will
to get all these things
sorted out.
Okay, how will you describe Nigeria's balance of trade position as at today compared to, say, 4 or 5 years ago?
Well, the balance of trade position is not so good. The balance of trade is a function of your exports and your imports. And to the extent that you have very weak capacity for production, to the extent that your exports are not competitive, to that extent, you may not be able to earn much from your exports. Over the years, the oil sector has been accounting for 80 to 90% of our total exports. So if anything happens to the oil sector, our balance of trade and balance of payments position collapses. So that is the situation. So the solution to that, first, is to see how fast we can also do what we call import substitution. That's to reduce the importation that we have by replacing them with local production. Secondly, how fast we can stop the importation of petroleum products. I go back to that. It is one of the biggest problems.
That's a tall order.
It's a tall order, but it has to be done, and it's achievable.
You sure it's achievable?
It is achievable. We have refineries, for goodness sake. But the problem is that when you leave the management of refineries in the hands of bureaucrats, with due respect to them, the bureaucrats are not trained to manage an enterprise. That is why you do all sorts of turnaround maintenance, you spend billions of dollars, and nothing comes out of it. And yet you have a whole chain of directors, general managers, assistant general managers, doing all sorts of emoluments. So the earlier we're able to undertake the right kind of reforms, bring in investors into our oil and gas downstream refining space, privatize these refineries. If we are not able to do that, we continue to have this problem.
Just go in circles.
Yes.
Okay, let's go on a higher plane, international trade now.
Yeah.
The balance of trade between advanced and developing countries often gets so skewed in favor of advanced countries. I'm sure you are aware of this.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is not healthy.
Yeah.
Right?
Certainly.
So what's responsible for this? And how do we reverse the trend?
It's a competitiveness issue. Mm-hmm. If you are trading internationally, what determines the effectiveness of your participation is your competitiveness. For you to produce and trade internationally in this economy is a tall order. When you are producing using diesel, 24 hours. Diesel price has gone up by close to 70% in the last 1 year or so. Diesel is now 270 naira per liter. How do you want to be competitive?
Depending on where you're buying anyway.
Depending on where you buy. It could even be much more than that.
That's what I'm saying.
Gas, which other bigger industries use, gas is now being sold in dollars to industries. You are producing in naira, you are selling your product in naira, your energy cost is coming in dollars.
That's crazy, isn't it?
How can you compete? LPFO, which is another source of energy that some industries use, is also imported. PMS, the price is going up for all the SMEs and that use all these petrol generators. The price is going up. So energy component of cost is so high and is contributing to the problem of competitiveness. And if you are not competitive, there is no way you can play in the international space.
Okay, when our leaders travel out
Yes.
on trade negotiations, do they go with the right negotiators? Because I asked that question because of the short-changing, a lot of short-changing that takes place that we all suffer at the end of the day.
Well, that is a big issue because trade negotiation teams are led by the government officials, by bureaucrats.
Bureaucrats.
And because of all the incentives that are associated with foreign travels, it's not often the right people that go for those negotiations.
That's the point I want to draw out.
Yeah. Because those who have the knowledge are sometimes not senior enough to influence the decision as to who will go and who will not go. So most times when you get to some of these trade negotiations, you see that apart from some of our officers that are based in Geneva and some of these other places, most people that go from the country cannot effectively take part in the negotiation. They don't even understand the issues
Involved.
Instances abound where people just get there, spend 1 or 2 days, and just go for shopping. Or move to another country. You know, it is seen more as an opportunity to just collect extra code and, you know. So the quality of representation is an issue. Again, it's a leadership issue.
How can we adjust that?
It is the leader that will determine. That, okay, if we are going to this negotiation, if those who have the capacity, who understand the issue, that should go.
That should go.
It's not necessarily the permanent secretary or the ministers. No, not necessarily. It is those who have the knowledge and the skill about it. You need to see the kind of team that some countries come with, even smaller countries. Because trade negotiations are very technical things.
Very technical. Right. Okay, let me go into this area too. Is banning of foreign imported goods really a step in the right direction? What of letting them be? And then place heavy tax on them, for instance. After all, that way you make more money for yourself.
You see, it's a trade policy matter. When you talk about trade policy, it's policy that guides your imports and exports. Now, sometimes we get it wrong. Because some of the challenges we face in the economy today is partly as a result of inappropriate trade policy. For you to determine what you should restrict or what you should allow to come in, you have to relate it to your capacity to produce. Because if you create too much gap between your demand and your capacity, it is the citizens that suffer. It is the citizens that suffer. That is part of the reason why the cost of goods and services are so high today. It's a patriotic thing to say that you want to protect. But you also have to be strategic in the way you protect. You protect in areas in which you know you have the capacity to meet the demand of your citizens. If the capacity is not there, if the gap between your domestic demand and the supply is so huge, it makes some sense to allow for imports to augment the domestic production. Because the risk is that while the people who are possibly in production, because of the scarcity, may be making money, which is good for business, is good for my members, for instance. But the scarcity is not good for the consumers. It's not good for the masses. So there has to be a balance.
A balance.
And it has to be a strategic balance. So that you don't import in a way to undermine domestic.
That's why I was going to ask you, between free trade and trade restrictions.
Yes.
Where do we toe
the
line?
It's a balance. Because you need to look at your competitive advantage. You need to look at your domestic value addition. If you must protect, you get more value where the domestic value addition is high. That means it will be easier for you to bridge the gap. Take cement, for instance. Cement uses limestone. The major components of the production is energy, which is gas, and limestone. Of course, you have your machineries.
That's right.
And another major factor is transportation. But you have the limestone here. So it is very easy. And even for cement, we had a transition period where some incentives were given that, okay, for those of you who are in the production of cement, we give you an import quota of so much. But after so many years, we are going to stop importation. So we had a balance of both importation and domestic production. And there was an incentive woven into it for those who are in production. The same thing should happen to even food products and things like that, so that the citizens don't undergo too much pain as a result of high prices. All the protests, riots, and things that we are seeing around the country, it's as a result of high prices. Purchasing power is dropping, prices are going up. So there has to be a balance.
Okay, now
between what you import and what you produce. And you have to also balance the interests of those who are investors, those who are producers, and those who are consumers. There has to be a balance. Otherwise, it could continue to generate unnecessary, avoidable social tension. We could even undermine the political capital of the administration.
All right. Is it not misplaced priority for Nigeria to leave West Africa, even the general African market, and begin to explore the Americas, Asia, even European markets for trade and commerce? Is it not misplaced priority?
No, it depends on what you are trading. It depends on what you are exporting and what you are importing. Because as a business person, you have your own business model, you have your own business judgment that you use. For instance, a lot of trading is taking place within the West African sub-region in terms of export. Quite a number of products that are produced here by some of our manufacturing companies. If you go to Ghanaian markets, Republic of Benin, Senegal, you find quite a lot of that. I told you already about our film and all of that, music industries. I told you about services, our banking, all of that, we have quite a lot of that. But there are some things that you want to export that the West African market may not be your best choice. If you're exporting crude oil, for instance, there is no, which is not a good thing anyway. It's not as if one is advocate, but there is no such a market for you in the West African sub-region or even in Africa. So you have big buyers outside of the continent.
Bigger buyers?
Yes, bigger buyers. Now, if you are talking of imports, again, it depends on what you are importing. If you are importing some critical raw materials, maybe things like either steel or some petrochemical products and so on, those things don't exist within Africa. They are probably in Europe, they are in America and so on. So it depends on what you are importing. But I take your point that it benefits more the continent, the more of continental trade that we have within the sub-region. Because if you look at the data, the volume of intra-African trade is just about 12% of total trade. We trade more outside Africa than we trade within the continent. And it's not good for us as a continent. So there's an initiative now at the level of the AU, African Union, to bring up what we call continental free trade area. Okay. In order to break barriers within the African continent so that the volume of trade within the continent can increase. And a lot of progress have been made on that. A lot of agreements have been signed. Our own ministry is also, Ministry of Trade and Investment is also involved in that.
This issue of free trade, let me dig more into it. Why is international free trade among nations of the world so difficult to achieve? Can it ever be achieved, really?
Well,
international free trade.
No, it's a very difficult thing, especially now, that even the major proponents of free trade are now going back on the philosophy of free trade.
Free trade.
Take America now. America has now become a champion of protectionism. Yes.
For its own political and
socio-economic
reasons.
Exactly. UK has pulled out of Brexit. Have pulled out of the EU.
Of the EU.
As through this phenomenon we call Brexit.
Brexit.
And the whole idea of the EU is to break down barriers so that there can be free trade. There can be free movement of people, free movement of capital, and free movement of goods and services. They have pulled out of it. So increasingly, we are beginning to see even increasing protectionism. So we are even going backwards. But for a country like ours, the best way you can get protectionism to work for us is to make sure that those who are producing produce at a competitive rate. If their cost of production remains high, the citizens will suffer. Because they will transfer that cost to the consumers. So that is why, in order to achieve results, if you want to go through that route, we need to create an enabling environment for those who are in production. There is no two way about it. Otherwise, the current challenges of high prices and things will continue. Take, for instance, a Toyota Corolla now costs about 13 to 15 million naira. I don't know how many middle-class person can afford that now. And part of it is this policy we call the auto policy. The auto policy's idea is that we need to increase the tariff so that we can produce our vehicles locally. But do we have the capacity to produce the vehicles?
So it makes nonsense.
How many of those vehicles have you seen on the road?
It makes nonsense of that kind of a policy.
It makes nonsense, and all those who are in the business of car dealers and all of that, they are groaning in pain as we speak.
No food, no money.
Yes. Some of them are closing down their business. Who is going to buy? How many people can afford to buy cars at that rate?
At that price?
Yes.
Okay. Before we round off, because our time is fast spent now, how will you describe the private-public sector collaboration for development in Nigeria in 1 or 2 words? Efficient or problematic?
No, it's getting better. Let me use it that way.
Okay.
It's getting better because we now have regular platform for engagement and dialogue between the vice president and the private sector. And the vice president has, adhered to that religiously.
Is he efficient?
Well, it can be better. It can be better because at the last forum, for instance, in order to enhance the efficiency of that dialogue, the vice president said that some of the issues that we bring to that dialogue, some of them can be dealt with at the level of the MDAs, the ministries and parastatals. I mean, we are complaining about the issue of NAFDAC, for instance, with all their outrageous fees and bureaucracy. It's something that the Ministry of Trade and, the Ministry of Health, because they report to the Ministry of Health, they should be able to deal with that.
Okay.
If you have issues with SON, the Ministry of Trade and Investment should be able to deal with that.
Okay.
So we are trying to see, using that platform to make sure that some of these things get cascaded down to ministerial level, where some of these issues can be dealt with and more issues can be attended to. And also given instruction that there has to be better engagement at sectoral level by the MDAs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, also between the PPP philosophy and outright privatization or concession, as the case may be, which one would you rather recommend for the government of the day?
No, you see, concessioning is also a form of PPP.
Okay.
Yes, it's also a form of public-private partnership. But again, it depends on what kind of parastatal you are looking at, or what kind of institution you are looking at. If you take the refineries, for instance.
Because of our time now.
Outright privatization, for instance, that is good.
For refineries?
Yes, but if you take infrastructure like roads, you want someone to build a road from here maybe to Benin or from here to Ondo State, and if you feel that the road is viable, it has to be a PPP. That's a public-private partnership. If you want investment in rail transportation, it has to be a public-private partnership. The same thing in health, the same thing in education. There's a whole lot that can happen under public-private partnership.
Maybe on a final note now, let's talk about the Nigerian manufactured goods. They are still far, far away from the standard that one expects at the international level. And this is why a lot of Nigerians have this insatiable appetite for foreign goods. Do you agree with me? In 1 or 2 sentences.
I agree with you, but it's not because the manufacturers don't know what to do. It's because the environment is very difficult for them. They know what quality is, they know what it is to produce quality products, but at what cost?
Why?
That is the issue.
Okay, maybe that's the point at which we're going to draw the curtain on the program for today. My guest is being the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce, which is the premier Chamber of Commerce in Nigeria, and his name is Mr. Muda Yusuf. It's been very kind of you coming all the way
to attend
this program.